wonderful story of love. Tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love. Wake the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it. Shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. 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 Though you are far away, wonderful story of love. Still he doth call today, calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, e'en from the dawn of creation. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love.
The next block we want to look at is chapter 2, verses 4 through 7, where the text there says, "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases." Some interesting language here. I will discuss some of the specific language if you want to, but I'm going to treat this, at least from my perspective, just in general terms, in seeking to talk about the point that's being made. He has brought me to his banquet hall. Fellowship now is experienced, at least on some level, is the point that's being made here. Up until this point, they have longed for one another. They've called for one another. The beloved has asked, who will, well, how can I say? Okay, the female has asked the future bridegroom. I guess is the best way I can say it. They're both beloved by the time we get to the end of the story. But anyway, has asked the future bridegroom, "Yeah, how can I find you?" He basically said, "Follow the tracks, and you can find me. If you follow the tracks of my sheep, then you can follow me to the pasture." Um, he's brought me to his banquet hall is simply a poetic way of saying he's brought me into his presence. I am with him now. So love is moved beyond longing, and at least to some level, communion has begun. Obviously, it is not what it will one day be. It is not yet on the other side of the marriage. It's not yet to that intimate state that it will one day be at, but it has at least begun. And therefore, the fellowship that exists between the two is strengthened. And we talked a lot about that, not so much last week, but the week before last, about the work that goes into building relationship and the time and the communication and all of those things that bring us to become more invested in one another, and that all of these relationships develop and strengthen over time. If we focus on them, if we make it our intent to strengthen them, relationships can also disintegrate and people can grow apart. Usually that's because the effort to communicate and the effort to build the fellowship ceases to happen. Sometimes people just take it for granted. There's an old story. I'm probably guilty of this more than I'd like to be, but there's an old saying. The wife says to the husband, "Well, you never tell me that you love me." He says, "Well, I told you once, and if I changed my mind, I'd let you know." That is not the way fellowship works. That's not the way relationship works. Continued effort and focus has to be put into it. And what happens in a lot of cases is when the relationship is being pursued, the effort is put in. Once the relationship is secured, the effort stops and the relationship begins to grow apart. And that's a problem. Yes, ma'am. and and I don't know. I knew your mom well enough to know she probably didn't say much in response, but um, she should have said, "What does that have to do with it? I still like to hear it." Communication is the foundation of relationship. If we do not share with one another, and that's what communication is, if we do not share with one another, there will not be a relationship. No matter how much we say we want it, and no matter how much we might within us actually desire it, without the effort being put in to build it and maintain it, it's not going to stay there. All right, so the fellowship here is strengthening. His presence refreshes her. Love nourishes her. And this relationship that is starting to develop between them, this fellowship, produces security for her. All of this is seen in the language that we've looked at here. He brought me to his banqueting house. His banner over me was love. What does that even mean? His banner over me was love. What's a banner? It's a flag, if you will. And so what's being expressed there is that his love is apparent. It's on display. And when we raise a flag over a building, that's usually the first thing. It's a terrible illustration, but I'm going to use it anyway. In war, one of the first things that happens when you move into a place, particularly a capital or a controlling government building in a region that you've taken possession of, the very first thing you do is what? You raise your flag, you raise your standard over it. What does that signify? What does it signify? The colors that are flying on a ship, who it belongs to. And that is what's essentially being expressed here. He has love for her, and that is on display. It can be seen. Uh, she goes on to say that he sustains me with raisins and refreshes me with apples. Sustenance. He provides sustenance for me. And not just sustenance, but stuff that's desirable. Um, and I don't know, modern Americans may take that kind of stuff for granted, but in certain places and at certain times when fresh food was not available, um, the idea of fresh things and particularly sweet things were extremely desirable. Um, and so that's what's being described here. His left hand is under my head, his right hand embraces me. Uh, he's holding me. Again, that is poetic language that essentially has the same force as Jesus talking about wanting to gather us up like chicks and protect us under his wings, like a mother hen broods her chicks. It is the protection and the safety and the intimacy, to at least a degree, that causes the security and the nourishment and the refreshing that relationships are supposed to bring about. Again, let's go back to Genesis 1. It is not good that a man should be alone. I shall what? Make for him a suitable help meet. That relationship is completing and it strengthens. And for folks who have lost their mate and whose children are grown and who find themselves at home alone, or for people who have outlived all of their family. That loneliness is a hard burden to bear. Had a good friend who I used to drink coffee with a couple of times a week. He was into his early 90s at the time, and he would look at me when everyone else was gone and say, "Why am I still here?" He had outlived his wife. He had outlived a few of his children. The rest of them were grown and had not just children and grandchildren, but great grandchildren, some of them. His great grandchildren were graduating from high school, and he had lived past all of his friends, all of his peers, his contemporaries, the people that he worked with, the people that he went to school with. And even though he was still engaged and got out and did things, he still felt lonely. Because I can tell you, talking to me, who was 40 years his junior, was very different than talking to someone who was his peer. Um, that fellowship, that relationship is extremely valuable. And when it's gone and you sit there in your house and there's no one else to talk to and there's no one to really pick up the phone and call, and you feel alone, that's a huge burden. And the occasional phone call or the occasional visit, those things become not just cherished, but refreshing and strengthening. They become vital. And that's what's being described here. And then notice as the language goes on in verse 7, I adjure you. What does that word adjure mean? We don't use that word a lot. Yeah, and I actually do not like that translation. And I'll tell you why in just a minute. Um, okay, to beg, request, or request earnestly, I think is an important qualifier. And that's the reason I don't like charge, because charge is a command. And that is not really what's being conveyed here. What's being conveyed here is a request, okay, supplication, and encouragement. I'm okay with encouragement because encouragement doesn't demand either. Encouragement just says, let's do this. The relationship has to mature according to proper time. That's the idea that's going on here, okay? It's not yet time for certain aspects of this relationship to exist. But the desire is there and the request is there. Love is invited. That's language that we've talked about in the introduction and in chapter 1. Love is received. And what's important about that word received? For the object, when you talk about something being received, for the object, at least from that perspective, that aspect of it is passive. I'm the active participant is the one who is giving the love. The one who's receiving the love is the passive one here. Love is invited, love is received, love is never compelled. When something is forced, it's not love. And this reinforces one of the major principles that we established in the introduction to the book, and that is God constantly invites us to fellowship with Him. He does not coerce us. If God demanded our worship, would we have a choice? Could we stop it? And the answer is no. And in fact, there's a time coming when that is going to be the case. When he appears before us, and the Bible says every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. The choice vanishes in the very presence of God. But for the time being, it's an invitation. It's an invitation for us to appreciate him. It's an invitation for us to long for him. It's an invitation for us to fellowship with him and walk with him and learn from him. He does not coerce or compel or even demand in the sense that he follows that through with forced action. Instead, he invites. Or as it's pictured in reverse in another place, he stands at the door and knocks. He wants to come in, but what doesn't he do? He doesn't barge in. And he certainly doesn't break in. Again, think of the omnipotent God. What does the word omnipotent mean? All powerful. Think of the omnipotent God. How could any of us prevent him from entering into us if the omnipotent God was willing to force his way in? And the answer is, well, we couldn't. And yet, the fact of the matter is, the Bible tells us that we can resist God. You stiff-necked and uncircumcised of heart, how long will you resist the Holy Spirit? Stephen asked his audience. We can resist God, but an omnipotent God couldn't be resisted if he was willing to barge in. Even if I go somewhere and I know I'm welcome, I may even have a key. You know what I usually do? Stand at the door and knock and wait for the door to be opened. That is what God does. Does God have a right to our worship, to our adoration, to our praise? Does he have a right to those things? Absolutely. But he still doesn't coerce it. He desires it. He invites it. He is willing to participate in the fellowship, in the relationship. But the teaching is fellowship can't be forced. And that's what we're seeing in these verses. Then, starting in verse 8, and this is kind of a long section all the way down to verse 13. I don't know, most Bibles, by the way, actually put the section all the way to verse 15. I'm stopping the discussion at verse 13. I'll go ahead and read it. The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, hurtling over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away, for behold, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone, the flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree ripens its figs, and by the way, there's an echo of that at the end of Christ's life, where he goes into Jerusalem and he sees a fig tree that what? Doesn't have fruit. And what does he do to that fig tree? He curses it. Why? Because it's the time for the ripening, but it's not there. The fruit's not there. The fig tree ripens its fig. Here, fruit's there. It's time. The vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. So what we have here is, again, an invitation being extended by the bridegroom. Now, we looked earlier at the future bride saying, I sure do wish I knew where you were so I could be with you. And he says, well, follow the tracks and you'll come to me. But now we have this picture that once the desire is expressed, what does the bridegroom do? He goes to her. Now, notice again, he stands outside the fence. He doesn't barge in, but he goes to her, and we'll talk about some of that language in just a minute, and says to her, what? Come with me. So his coming here is very eagerly anticipated. The voice of my beloved, I can hear him. And the bride immediately recognizes his voice. My sheep hear my voice, and they know me, and I know them. That intimate familiarity. There are people, these people exist. The minute you hear their voice, you know who it is. You know them well enough. You know their voice. You know the characteristics, whether it's on the telephone, whether it's from around a corner, whether it's on a recording. None of that matters. You immediately know their voice because you are that familiar with them. The voice of my beloved. And so the emphasis now is shifting to the bridegroom. The bride immediately recognizes and listens. And love does that. Love listens and love expects certain things. And I want you to notice that nothing prevents his coming to her. He comes across mountains, he comes across hills, he just leaps over them like a gazelle or a stag. Nothing is too big. When settlers moved out west, as this country was expanding, mountains, gorges, rivers proved to be difficult impediments to their progress. And for a great number of people, they never made it where they were going because of it. They died along the way. They couldn't, or maybe a better way to put it is they were unwilling to risk traversing. Nothing will stop him from coming. He comes across mountains and hills. There's an eagerness that's conveyed here. There is the idea that becomes very clear, even though it's not expressed, it becomes very clear from what it does say that the bridegroom desires the fellowship just as much as the bride. And I'm just going to try probably to use that language, bride and bridegroom, even though we're not to that stage yet, just for clarity's sake. The language describes that the season has changed. What, from a literary standpoint, and therefore from a figurative language standpoint, do we mean when we talk about winter giving way to spring? Renewal and birth and life. What happens in the spring? The flowers bloom, the plants begin to grow again, everything turns green. What do the birds do? They lay eggs, and those eggs hatch, and then you have the babies. And that's also what happens in the pasture and what happens. New things come. Things are growing. That is the imagery. This winter is now past, he says, and spring has arrived. And so everything speaks of life and it speaks of fruitfulness. Look, the fig tree, it's ripe. The vines, which would be talking about what? The grapes. They're in blossom, and the sweet smell of them can be smelled. It's spring. And life is here. Things are renewed. We have expectation because what follows the spring? Okay, the summer, which is the growing season, and then what follows the summer? The harvest. expectation of fruit. Creation itself is reflecting the invitation. It's underscoring this burgeoning relationship and fellowship. We use this kind of language all of the time. We talk about people who are in the spring of their life, and then we talk about those who have entered the fall and winter years. What are we talking about? Those that are growing and those that are what? It's okay, we can say it. We're not afraid of it. Those that are dying. This relationship is growing. And when do things grow the most? Spring. That's when things change. So, and then again, the invitation here is completely unmistakable. It's not even subtle or hidden in this text. Arise, my darling. And in that language, not only is there an invitation, but there is also what? Intimacy. Raise your hand if when I saw you this morning, I said, my darling to you. Hadn't really talked to my wife yet, so just so y'all know, that's the reason she's not raising her hand. Why didn't I call you darling? I might have called you friend. I might have called you brother or sister. I might have called you a lot of things, but why didn't I use darling? Because we ain't that close. That'd be a little creepy. Now, in some southern places, and certainly during certain times, that was actually a common social. Hey, darling, come here. I still thought it was creepy. You ain't my darling. But that's the language. Arise, my darling. And then this is important. Come away. What is he still wanting her to do? Follow him. Come with me. Listen, we have to understand this relationship we have for God. God did come to the earth to dwell with us. He never did that with the intent of doing what? Participating in our deeds or staying. His purpose for coming here was not to become like us. His purpose for coming here was to invite us to come and be with him and to go with him and to be like him, which is exactly what this invitation is expressing. What is the world full of? Okay, it is certainly that, unbelief. And that leads to what? Sin, and sin leads to death. That's what the world's full of. How many people had to come into the world before the first person sinned? 2. We don't have a very good record, do we? We don't know exactly how much time elapsed between the formation of Adam and Eve and the sin in the garden, but they didn't have any children yet. So I'd argue it's pretty quick. Now, in a 900-year lifespan, maybe it's longer than we would think of, but it didn't take long, and it didn't take much outside influence. And I've made this point before, and sometimes I wonder if people ever even think about it. People think about, well, the reason I sinned is because this person led me into it, or this person. They were in perfect circumstances. They were in direct fellowship with God. He spoke to them. They heard him. They could speak back to him. They felt his presence. They were in a garden that was prepared specifically for them. They had everything that they needed provided for them. They had one task, that they were not supposed to do. One thing. Everything else was okay, but one thing, don't do that. Don't eat this fruit. Eat any other fruit you want, do it. Don't eat this fruit. It was really the only temptation, and they still sinned. In the world that we're in and what we're surrounded by, understand that it's even easier for us to fall into temptation. And the Bible shows that, because just a few generations later, we get to the story of Noah, only Genesis chapter 6. And what was the condition of the world? The thought and intention of mankind was evil continually.
A lot of people want to see what will happen if we do instead of don't.
Yes, that's essentially what Eve did as well. Problem is, God had already told them what would happen. He's already told us what will happen. We will lose relationship with Him. And then we want to act surprised about it. God didn't come to the earth to become like us. He came to the earth and left us an example of what we could be. And then said, what? Come with me. Follow me. Be like me, and eventually you'll be with me. Permanently with me. Which, by the way, is exactly what goes on in the relationship that we're talking about here. Man shall leave his father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. Come with me, be with me, walk with me, and we'll forever be together. That's the invitation. Very unmistakable. And the beloved is invited, therefore, to respond. So throughout Scripture, the initiative belongs to God. That's what's being portrayed here. God loved first. God came to us. God called us when He came. His people are invited to answer the call. And this continues the movement that was established in chapter 1. There's small movement in chapter 1. This just pushes that movement forward. Look at verses 14 and 15. O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the crannies of the cleft, let me see your face, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. So love calls for openness. My dove, let me see your face, let me hear your voice. I want to see, I want to hear you. Don't hide from me. And so distance is being overtaken by what? By proximity. Separation is being overtaken by fellowship. Covenant requires continual care. Catch the foxes. Are there things out there that are trying to destroy us? Absolutely. Your enemy, the devil, stalks like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Proverbs, I talked about Proverbs a little bit last week. Told you that there are 3 prominent ladies in the book of Proverbs. There's wisdom calling out to us. There is the virtuous woman at the end of the book, which I think represents us if we are responsive to him and faithful to him. And then there is the harlot who is trying to seduce us and entice us and pull us away. Catch the foxes. They're after the vineyard. They'll destroy the produce before fruit is ever born. Same thing as the parable of Jesus when he talks about the worries and the riches and the pleasures of this life that choke out the plant so that it doesn't bear fruit. It never reaches maturity. There are things out there that are actively seeking to keep this relationship from developing. So catch them. That's proactive. Stop them before they do the damage. Stop them before they come. That's, and again, this is a terrible illustration, but it illustrates the point, so I'll use it anyway. That is, in a nutshell, the defense strategy of the United States for the last 250 years. We want to be able to reach out and deal with you where you are before you get here to fight us here. Because we learned very early that it's better for the fight not to be at our front step. Because the collateral damage of the fight at our front step is us and our property. We learned that the hard way with the British and with the French and with the Indians and with ourselves. And since then, we've said, all right, we're going to make sure the war is somewhere else to the best of our ability. Stop the problem before it does the damage. Be proactive. That's why self-discipline is so important. That's why training ourselves to discern between good and evil is so important. That's why not passing by the harlot's house, again, pulling from Proverb. He says, don't even go down her street. You know the harlot's there. You know the harlot's trying to seduce you into her bed. So don't even walk by the house. Find another way. That's proactive. That's preventative. We've learned that with medicine too, right? The best medicine is what? An ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. So do healthy things now so that you don't get the morbidity. Because even if you overcome the morbidity, what happens? Damage is done. It's better to prevent it than just to stop it. So catch the foxes. The vineyard's flourishing. Small dangers threaten the fruitfulness of the relationship, of our lives, of pretty much anything. Why do we do? Well, we got a mechanic sitting in the room, so I'm going to use him. Do you do preventive maintenance on aircraft, or do you just fix things after they're broken? Why? Okay, to preempt a problem, which in and of itself can save lives, but small problems become what? Big problems. And so you go through, and I'm going to make this very simplistic. You go through and check all the nuts and make sure that they're tightened, and on a helicopter situation, they're pinned or wired into place so that they can't come off. Because if that nut backs off and comes loose and a rod goes flying around, or even the nut itself goes flying around through a turbine, what does it do? Because it does a lot of damage in the process. Just that one little thing ends up tearing up a lot of other stuff. So you do maintenance to prevent the problem from being greater than it need to be. Catch the fox so that the fruit can come. The relationship has to be guarded. We have to preserve. And this is why it's not okay just to say, well, I was baptized when I was 14. Okay. Have we worked to preserve the relationship? Have we worked to build the relationship? Are we maintaining the relationship? Because these things don't maintain themselves. Have you ever heard stories of couples that have been married for 35 or 40 or 45 years and then the marriage ended up in divorce? You actually have heard those stories. You know what usually happens? The kids get grown, the kids move out, the kids make their own families, and the spouses don't even know each other. There's no relationship there anymore. And there's no reason to pretend because the kids are out of the house now. And they say things like, well, we just grew apart. No, you didn't just grow apart. You didn't maintain your relationship. We have to actively maintain relationship. I got friends, close friends that I had in high school that I never talk to anymore. And if I talked to them, I wouldn't know what to say. Why? Because we haven't maintained our relationship. I got other friends that I do talk to. Why? Because we work to maintain a relationship. I got one friend in this world that if we don't hear from each other, we call other people and say, go check on him because I hadn't talked to him in the last 4 hours. I'm afraid something might be wrong. Other people I know could be gone for months before I even notice they're not there. In one case, a relationship's been maintained, in another case, it hasn't. We have to maintain our relationship, and particularly maintain our relationship with God. We have to guard it, preserve it, make sure that the enemies are stopped before damage is done to the best of our ability. Most relationships are not destroyed by a single failure. Most relationships are weakened through neglected compromises day in and day out. And faithfulness requires vigilance. All right, got to stop. Appreciate everybody's presence and participation. And we'll pick up in verse 17 and certainly be prepared to get into chapter 3 next time because we'll do that.
Wonderful story of love, tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love, with the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love.